Hey there, I just watched season 2 of Centaurworld. I finished it today, and as it turned out, my review of the second season wasn't all that interesting. Season 2 is fine. I would even say pretty good. I still don't like the show very much. My opinion on that front hasn't really changed. It's not my thing, and that's okay. If anything, I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the show this time around compared to other recent shows and movies I've watched on Netflix. Specifically, I recently watched and reviewed Back to the Outback and Dogs in Space, and I found both of them to be mostly forgettable or kind of actively grating, at least in my opinion. I may not like Centaurworld's personality, but at least it has a personality. Centaurworld is genuinely creative, there's a lot of energy behind it, and the team is clearly bringing something new to the table, which is only good news for an entertainment industry that's painfully homogenous most of the time. Oh yeah, and the music is still great. Got some real bangers here. So instead of stretching that paragraph that I just read into a 15-minute video, I would like to talk about episode 2 of Centaurworld Season 2, which is an episode chock full of references to real-world stuff like fandoms, influencers, and cons. Now, in a weird fantasy show about centaurs who need to fight a spooky Ghibli villain, this episode felt a bit out of place, especially since many of the specific references to followers and episodes and Q&As are just completely wedged in. But it was specifically because the episode felt so out of place that I got the impression the episode was important to the team behind the show. Apparently, they really wanted to talk about some of the negative aspects of contemporary fandoms. And wouldn't you know it, I've been wanting to talk about fandom culture for a while now, but it's a huge topic. So what I'm gonna do is use this episode of Centaurworld to reflect on a few things, and then I'll see how people respond and whether they want to hear more from me on the topic. No transition, let's just go. I made this video discussion thing about Craig of the Creek a couple weeks ago, and one of the most interesting parts of the discussion was about certain portions of the show's fandom and their ravenous desire for Craig of the Creek to officially confirm and validate everything they wanted to see. They wanted their shipped characters to get together. They wanted basically every named character to be confirmed as gay or pansexual or non-binary or neurodivergent or a combination of any of these and so much more. I'm exaggerating a bit, but that's kind of the vibe you get from the subreddit especially. Now, I really have to step lightly here because I'm not trying to put down fandoms in a broad sense, and I might technically be a creator, but I'm nowhere near the level of the folks behind these shows, so I can't speak to their experience either. But as an observer, I find all of this stuff really fascinating. I think one big ingredient here is the relationship between art and audience that has existed in some form for a long time. I mean, when are we saying that art started? Who was the first art? I know it wasn't Spiegelman. But the other major ingredient is a much more recent phenomenon, and that's the weirdly direct connection between creators and fans facilitated by social media and the internet in general. So what are fandoms actually doing here? What are we talking about in this video? Well, fandoms do all kinds of stuff, and it's very easy to make the mistake of referring to a specific fandom as a singular entity, but of course it's not. Every fandom is made up of many different people, and even if we limit fandoms to the people who are active in forums and communities dedicated to a specific media property, there's still a lot of diversity within each group. Diversity in a general sense, not necessarily like racial or ethnic diversity. So these days, fandoms are known, I would say, for creating fan art, parodies, unsanctioned merch, and for talking about a specific property online or in person, maybe even organizing conventions. Fandoms are also sometimes associated with some really negative activities, like getting into huge online arguments and dogpiling or outright harassing people they disagree with, maybe even people directly involved in the creation of the thing they care about. These are just broad strokes here. I'm assuming people who have clicked on this video already have a pretty good picture of the modern fandom landscape. Fanscape. So not only are fandoms and their actions highly visible online nowadays, they're also visible out in meat space, particularly at massive live and streamed events like E3 and Comic-Con. Big events like these also now constitute a huge marketing opportunity. Not only do companies show their junk to the attendees who are actually there, but they also broadcast parts of these events to the public, and meanwhile, attending influencers and common folk provide free marketing by posting about everything that they're seeing there. Fandoms are naturally naturally occurring and potentially profitable. And for creators, dealing with fandoms on multiple levels is now just part of the job, unfortunately. Back in the day, if you ran a TV show, the general public would probably never even see your face, and fans would have no way of reaching you outside of maybe some snail mail sent to the station. But now, creators are expected to be active on social... Oh, hi. I'm under a blanket and the cat found her way under. Yes, oh, it's so nice to see you too. Yeah, that's the microphone. Yeah, I know, it's nice and warm in here. We don't really have any heat right now, so it's been a bit of an adventure. But now, creators are expected to be active on social media, and that means that just about anyone currently living can say things directly to those creators. People have always been passionate about the things they like, and online, it's a lot easier to say some things that you might not say in real life. This line of communication between fans and creators is neutral. It's not inherently good or bad, but it enables both good and bad things, and we have seen good and bad things come of it. People can tell creators how valuable their work has been to them, or even engage in some healthy, positive discourse about something. People can also bully and harass creators without repercussions. Now, we can get back to Centaurworld, where the portrayal of in-universe fans of the main cast initially seemed kind of harsh. I honestly didn't understand why the show would make clear references to real-world fans and make them out to be weirdos and dummies. Seemed a bit strange and counterintuitive, and as far as I've seen, the Centaurworld fandom has only ever really been positive and supportive. I was never really involved in that community, of course, and I'm not that crazy about the show, but nothing has stood out to me as being especially negative or extreme, at least at first. To be fair, too, in the show, the depiction of fans really isn't that harsh. It definitely seems that way in the episode, but they bring the characters back later on, and it's much more mild. I tried to look around, because I was curious, sometimes you get really famous instances of fan backlash or controversy or something. I was like, maybe there was a big thing that happened in the small window of time between the first season releasing and the second season going into production. I really didn't find too much. I didn't really find any headlines about the Centaurworld fans doing something uncouth. I was really curious because this episode of the show, episode 2, references a fan petition to change the ending of the first season, essentially, and maybe it's a more general reference to useless, petty fan petitions, but in fact, I did find a fan petition seeking to change the entire second season or something. It might be fake, and if it is fake, it's very funny. And if it's real, it's still very funny. But outside of that, I really didn't find too much. Maybe some fans have been really awful on Twitter. I don't know. But you know what? Let's assume that the show wasn't actually trying to snap back at real-world fans of Centaurworld. Still seems weird to go so hard in this episode if it wasn't tied to some kind of real-world negativity, but whatever. Instead, I'm going to guess that the episode was inspired by a more detached, conceptual reflection on this relationship between creators and fans. Maybe one or more people on the Centaurworld team have wondered how to navigate these waters. So to be clear, I'm not trying to say anything about Centaurworld fans specifically in the video. Let's just take this episode here as an abstract, imaginary look at the problem. The episode acknowledges that fandoms can be obsessive, kind of pushy, and that they feel a sense of ownership over the characters and events of a show, when in actuality, they don't have that. I would agree with just about all of those impressions. And for me, that brings up two big questions that I'm gonna try my best to answer. One, why do fandoms act like that sometimes? And two, how can creators deal with all that in a healthy and comfortable way? Those are some very big questions, and just a bit of a spoiler, I don't have all the answers for, I don't have, the only correct answer to this stuff. This is just something I'm doing as an exercise. It's just because I find it interesting, okay? I need to let you know that. It would be great if fandoms just didn't act this way. It would be cool if fans accepted that the characters and stories they care about so much aren't really theirs and that they're not defined by their affection for a media property. But then on the other hand, you have creators and like executives telling fans all the time that everything they do is for the fans and that the show or movie franchise is just as much theirs as it is the studio's, even though it's certainly not. And on top of that, fan influence has seen some big scores recently, most notably the completion and release of the Snyder Cut. So is it one of those situations where if you give a mouse a cookie, they change the course of an entire show? Also, companies creating and releasing content probably should listen to their customers sometimes, especially if they're engaging in anti-consumer practices or just aren't giving the audience what they want, which is a lose-lose situation. I'm saying it's complicated, and there are probably many different answers to these questions. I'm going to try to give my answers on the off chance that somebody wants to hear them. So why do fandoms start to get more uppity and controlling in certain cases? Well, like I just mentioned, they're told that they're important to the property, and they are on a practical level. And again, people get really invested in the entertainment they love. That's how storytelling has worked for thousands of years. People in the audience, they relate to one or more of the characters and they feel inspired. It might even help them cope with problems of their own, so of course they're going to be emotionally invested. And I would argue that thanks to the ease of access to content and the limitless reproduction of digital entertainment formats, media has a more consistent presence in people's lives than ever before, and it's also probably more important to some people, if not all people, than it ever has been before. There are also now more ways than ever to express your feelings about media. And of course, as we've been talking about here, fans have more access to creators. And maybe some folks are expressing frustration regarding a lack of control in other areas of their lives by trying to exercise control over the characters they love. By the way, have you seen that episode of Adventure Time where Jake essentially becomes addicted to shipping miniature versions of people he knows? It's really good, and it was originally going to be the basis for this video, but this is already way too long. But what about the creators? What about their side of things? How can they deal with all of this without losing their minds? Well, for starters, it would be great if creators weren't required implicitly or explicitly to be active on social media. But from the corpo perspective, the business perspective, I kind of get it. Especially for smaller projects, engaging with fans and potential fans can help generate interest and loyalty, especially if those interactions stoke parasocial relationships. Although the ethics of generating parasocial relationships that result in monetary gain are bad, it's bad. Please don't do that on purpose or even by accident, maybe. So assuming creators have to be on social media and interact with fans through various means, what do? Well, I'll leave it up to them. I'm not going to tell anybody what to do. They can live their lives. It's okay. Do what's the most healthy for you. But the best idea I came up with, as strange as it might sound, is to try to set boundaries, either implicitly or explicitly. But even then, how can you expect everyone to be respectful of those boundaries? I don't know. I think I'd just like to make a very humble request to end things here. If you're a fan of something, please remember that for the people behind that thing, this is their job. They got hired for a reason, presumably, and they're gonna make what they're gonna make. And that's okay. It's not in your control. Just be a blade of grass. Remember that from the other show? Just one blade of grass among many. If media isn't giving you what you want to see, then make it. That's where you can have as much control as you want. But hey, my audience is usually very kind, so maybe I'm preaching to the choir here. I hope this was interesting to someone, and as always, I would love it if this sparked some more conversation on the topic. But I'll leave it there. Thanks for stopping by.